Support Narativ's independent journalism at patreon.com/narrative and check out our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe and download. Welcome to Narativ on a very big news day. There's no doubt in my mind that none of us ever expected to see a day where Ghislaine Maxwell would be arrested for the crimes that she's been arrested for today. A very dramatic day. Let me take you through what happened. FBI agents arrested Maxwell at 8:30 this morning. She was living at her 156-acre property in Bradford, New Hampshire, which was bought in cash just last December through a carefully anonymized LLC. The indictment is 18 pages long and details how Maxwell enabled and participated in the sexual abuse of women as young as 14. And it alleges Maxwell lied under oath on 2 occasions. The indictment also describes a pattern of grooming, which sometimes resulted in sex acts in which Maxwell took part. We also found out today that Ghislaine Maxwell was not struggling for money. Between 2016 and 2020, she had 15 different bank accounts, valued at between hundreds of thousands of dollars to more than $20 million. Ghislaine is not likely to get bail. That's because she's deemed a flight risk. She has both a French and a British passport. But all eyes tonight are on Prince Andrew, the Queen's favorite son and the man at the crosshairs of this investigation. This is one of the most dramatic events that could possibly happen in a court case as big as this and in a case as big as this. Joined tonight by Steve Hoffenberg, a witness to many of the Epstein crimes, one of the few people who could attest to what happened during that time. Hey, Steve, how are you?
Hi, Zev. How are you doing on this remarkable Justice Day?
It is a remarkable Justice Day. We also have Lincoln's Bible, and we also have Eric Garland with us. They're going to have a little bit of a hard time talking to you directly, but they'll pass questions to you through me. But hi, LB and Eric Garland. How are you doing?
We're good. I'm good. How are you, Eric?
I'm great.
So let's get to the big. Steve, you more than anybody else have been working so hard on this case. You know it so intimately. Did you ever think a day like this would have come?
I must compliment the FBI and the U.S. Attorney, the acting U.S. Attorney in New York City for the Southern District of New York, for the amazing justice that occurred today and the shocking suffering that Ghislaine Maxwell is now under is probably one of the worst days of her life. And it's a sad moment for her and a great moment for the FBI, the victims of the crimes, and the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York.
It really is a great victory. When we think back to 2008, she was included in that non-prosecution agreement, which would have covered, I think, the years that these crimes took place. Do you have a sense of why they would not look into or not take into account the prosecution or the non-prosecution agreement that Epstein concluded with Acosta and the other legal minds back in 2008?
Ghislaine Maxwell, and I've spoken with her team regularly, and her position to her staff and her spokesperson was that she's not going to have a problem. Mm-hmm. She expected no indictment, no arrest, and I can only see that the FBI is very serious about this case. The FBI has this case under control, and now you're going to see prosecutions because they have the main defendant under arrest, other than Jeffrey Epstein, right now.
And she's not going to get bail very easily. I mean, as we saw in that little piece, she's too much of a flight risk. She has no reason to be in the United States. She's got multiple passports, multiple nationalities, and international contacts. She's a real flight risk. So she's going to have to stay in jail in much the same way that Jeffrey Epstein had to stay in jail.
Well, she faced filings in federal court today in New England explaining that she's not entitled to any bail in the arrest that took place this morning. The FBI, U.S. Attorney, explain step by step of her flight risk that prevents her to have bail, and it will be a very difficult decision for the court to override the FBI and U.S. attorney and allow her freedom. It will be very hard. I'm just worried that her state of mind will create another suicide in this case, because she is emotionally suffering more than we can imagine, much more than anybody could think about.
It really must be. I mean, you can't imagine what it must be like to suddenly face, going into prison behind bars and being such a high-profile prisoner as well, and knowing what happened to Jeffrey Epstein and the fate he succumbed to. It's a very, it must be very distressing. And yet none of us could imagine this happening because she was so close to Prince Andrew. She still remains very close friends with Prince Andrew. It's believed that Prince Andrew was the reason Jeffrey Epstein got away with it in 2008. He was one of the forces that intervened on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein to get him that lighter sentence. And so everyone has sort of assumed the same thing would happen now. But clearly this is 2020 and there's a very different field on the table, a very different team on the field, I should say, thinking very differently about how to prosecute this.
Keep in mind that they fired the Attorney General, fired the man that was in charge of this case,
right,
Mr. Berman, and
right.
That happened recently. And now, 2 weeks after the firing of Mr. Berman, the head of this case, we see the most amazing part since Jeffrey Epstein's death occur by the FBI this morning.
Do you think
that's the arrest of Ghislaine Maxwell?
Do you think the timing had a lot to do with Jeffrey Berman's firing? Because it seems to me that it's quite, it's either very coincidental or it's followed quite quickly after his firing. Was it a message to Donald Trump? Was it a message to others that they were serious about this case and they were not going to be bullied by the firing of Jeffrey Berman?
It was a very loud message,
mm-hmm.
a screaming message to the defendants in this case that have not been arrested so far. Now have Ghislaine Maxwell in federal custody. Now, Donald Trump, as the president of the United States, is at a different level of what he's probably dealing with daily because his plate is full. But the FBI understands this case now, and they are very aggressive in the prosecution in New York City of Delaine Maxwell, who's going to name names of very important people. Very important.
Why do you think she's going to do that?
Place.
Why do you think she's going to be naming names of important people?
The arrest of Ghislaine Maxwell, a very privileged socialite who grew up very rich and very comfortable and very accustomed to a great lifestyle, puts her behind bars in a terrible incarceration, in a terrible prison environment, in a very sad place. Now, if she starts cooperating quickly with the FBI and with the Justice Department, her imprisonment could be changed, where she could be in a department of imprisonment that would be survivable for Ghislaine Maxwell.
So you're convinced that she's going to be turning to a state witness, that she's going to be cooperating and helping the investigation as it continues. You don't think she has any reason not to do that?
I'm 100% convinced that she will become a cooperating witness for the FBI and the United States Department of Justice. And a lot of people, Darren Indike, Leslie Wexner, Prince Andrew, a lot of people are shaking in their boots right now, scared to death of this arrest.
Right, there is a lot of people. There are many, many people. Wexner's one of them. Dershowitz is another. Eric's having a little dance here because he gets very excited about about these guys going down. Eric also has a good question.
Well, to get a good deal, when you're a cooperating witness, you have to give up somebody up the chain. So who else up the chain of espionage could Ghislaine Maxwell give up? Wexner and Prince Andrew are a good start, but Bibi Netanyahu, if she's as connected to the Israeli intelligence services, we think, who are the big fish she's gonna give up?
Bibi Netanyahu could be a name that comes up, and another name, I was just thinking of Ehud Barak, as you were saying, that he's obviously part of this investigation now as well. There's some prominent politicians from around the world that could find themselves, even MBS, if you think about it, because MBS was so close. So there's a lot of big names that could be in play here.
I don't think Saudi Arabia or MBS is worried about this arrest. I think Alan Dershowitz would be very, very scared about this arrest.
Yeah.
If they choose to turn against Dershowitz, the FBI decides to go against Dershowitz, I believe Ghislaine Maxwell could do tremendous damage. She also controls other witnesses.
How so?
Well, Sarah Kellen,
mm-hmm.
Adriana Ross, Leslie Groff, Nardina Makanova.
You're describing the operation team that actually was part of Epstein's human trafficking operation. There was 6 or 7 people involved in scheduling the massages and in grooming and recruiting all these young girls, and then also in the transportation. So there's the Lolita Express comes to mind as well, which is under investigation in the Virgin Isles, and that could as well take down Darren Indyke, who's currently the estate's trustee.
There's no question that today's arrest will cause Darren Indyke a tremendous problem in court, a tremendous problem, because Maxwell has the evidence against Darren Indyke, who is part of the billions of dollars that are missing, that are totally stolen.
You think billions of dollars? That's
going to come about now.
You think billions?
Oh yeah, this is definitely above $1 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Darren Indyke has never told the truth about what's in the Epstein estate. In my opinion, he has falsified every comment that I've seen published. Goes back to him as the trustee, and there is no way that he's telling the truth. He's absolutely lying.
Wow.
You've been saying that for a long time. And for those of you who are looking at the screen, Darren Indyke is the guy that's sort of at the bottom next to Thomas Barak. There's a circle of influence, if you want, around Jeffrey Epstein that I've created about people who might be worried about what might be coming in the near future. And among them, Donald Trump is, of course, one of the people who might be worried because he does face litigation or potential litigation for some of those rapes that he was accused of doing with Jeffrey Epstein. But then ultimately, those cases were withdrawn because the witnesses were intimidated. Can you talk a little bit about Donald Trump's exposure here?
Well, Donald Trump, as the president of the United States, cannot be charged with a crime. So it's hard to understand that Donald Trump would be concerned this minute.
Mm-hmm.
If he's reelected president of the United States, then he'll have another 4 years. And this case is going to go on for much more than that 4 years. So
that's if he wins. If he doesn't win,
know.
He could be exposed very soon. It could be a new attorney general.
24 weeks. He could be charged in 24 weeks.
If Donald Trump doesn't win re-election, he would have a major problem with all the allegations he's facing.
Right. This might be the least of his
problem. That's right, Steve. Tell the truth.
But he's not worried about that right this minute.
Yeah, right. He's got bigger.
But he does have. He definitely, President Trump definitely has issues about what's going on in the Epstein cases, for sure.
I just find it completely implausible that Berman wasn't ready to pull the trigger on this indictment seconds before he was fired. Because the new AG she's in there, and clearly she was involved and has, your assistant AG, they know what's going on in these cases, but there was probably, for her to be in this new position only 2 weeks, some catching up on, okay, let's look at it all, let's make sure we buttoned everything down. Now her name's on this, right? She's the leader. So to just have her pull this trigger in just 2 weeks after being put there tells me that this indictment was ready to go.
He was fighting for her to get the job because
he was fighting for her. Berman, whatever everyone wants to say about Berman, he was installed by Trump and blah, blah, blah. Berman held tough. And then when he went ahead and said, okay, I'm stepping down rather than letting these people fire me, and because he knew he couldn't be fired. They couldn't fire him. But this case was on the line. Clearly, this indictment was on the line. And I think we owe a great amount of gratitude to these prosecutors and the FBI for seeing this through. I mean, my God, I am so grateful to them that this woman is arrested and in prison and facing something she won't be able. Steve is right. She will not be able to get out of this without proffering some information. And I think she is. There was some reporting of the folks that were actually listening in on the call that, it's all virtual, the court hearing where she was remanded into custody. And there was a woman there's some reporting from that of the folks that were hearing it, that there was a woman with a British accent that was pretty flip in the beginning, saying, what is this? I don't understand what's going on. Ha ha. And throwing an F-bomb out there while the court was proceeding. And the judge and everyone was sort of saying, get control over this client, right? And then they had audio issue, and clearly they were getting control over her, because I don't know of anyone else that was,
Was this? Who was
the
voice? Was it her?
This was the voice. It was, she was saying this, and then when it was like, we are sending you to Southern District, right? And she was like, I don't understand what's happening, clearly lost. And then that kind of got under controlled. And the attorney was questioned, have you explained to your client what's going on? And he was like, yes, I have. Steve's right. She did not expect this. She didn't understand it when it was happening. She was being flip about it. I'm sure she thought, where are these white knights that I work for and that are my friends that are supposed to swoop in here and make sure, nothing happens to me. Daddy save me. She went right into daddy save me mode. And now she's facing the reality of this.
What's so interesting is that
amazing.
The Queen cannot be charged for crimes in the British system. I believe members of her family can't be charged for certain crimes in the British system, and that sort of is carried over into America. People have sort of accepted that somehow royalty is excluded from law, but it isn't the case. In fact, that's why we had a revolution. So the reason Ghislaine might be leaning on her both intelligence contacts in Israel and her royal family contacts is that she has lots of reason to believe, because of precedent, that she wouldn't be charged, because basically she was working for them. But that did not happen this time. This is the first time I can think of in history that this has happened, where someone actually working for an intelligence agency and a royal family would have gotten to the point of being charged in an American court system. It seems remarkable to me.
The FBI deserves the applause and credit today, because they did fight for charging Maxwell, who definitely was protected by Prince Andrew. There's no question.
Right.
But the FBI broke through, and today they charged Maxwell, who is going to be the most important witness in criminal cases taking place today in America for years to come.
It really is a breakthrough for the rule of law. And when I woke up this morning, I was feeling a little despondent about the rule of law. I was about to,
I know you were.
to rant and rave about that. And then minutes later, this news came in, and I was like, well, look at that. Isn't that amazing that there's still a republic, it still stands, and we still have the rule of law.
Here was a point I made on the Stuttering John podcast earlier today about the dates of the charges. These are not the 2000s or the 2010s. The date range in these indictments, 1994 through 1997, the key years that the Russian mafia was rolling La Cosa Nostra. in New York when Donald Trump was getting owned by foreign powers. That's the date range.
Really?
Why would you have an indictment so old? These were acts taken in the mid 90s as the whole reset with Russia's going, and they were just resetting their spies and their mafia and their state to be one weapon that the world had never seen before. That is the date range of this indictment. And the only reason that it is possible, I imagine with near certainty, is that the counterintelligence cases that it would abut, that would be right next to, that it's been delayed for, they've known that Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein are monsters for over 25 years. And the reason that they couldn't charge them, national security threat to the United States, that threat is mitigated to the point that they can drop the indictments. And the FBI's memory goes back to the mid 90s and probably before. So I agree with Steve. These people should be shaking in their boots that their bad acts in 87 and 95 and 2001 and 2008 and every day since, that their rapes, their industrial rape of our girls and our boys going back that many years to get a hold of this country and its democracy, we remember. And there's apparently enough national security issues dealt with that we can deal with your crimes. And I'd love to, talk about Ghislaine Maxwell's status or whatnot, but her, she's a monster sent to destroy this country and the rule of law. Fucking care what happens to her outside of her, the truth of what these people did and everybody that dealt with them and protected them and all of that, bring it out. But they were here to destroy, not only, they didn't just hurt these human beings in this horrible way, bodily, mentally, emotionally, their souls. They didn't just create an atrocity on an industrial scale. They did it to destroy the beacon of democracy and rule of law and free will, and they will answer for it in history.
It's a very impassioned take there. Steve, can you tell us a little bit more about the human trafficking operation? What was it all about? What were they trying to do with all this human trafficking? Why these teenage girls? What's the point behind all of that?
Well, many have said that are experts in trafficking and watching Jeffrey Epstein over all the years that he did sexual trafficking, that there was a reward for Epstein and Maxwell from the use of the girls given to others of power, influence, and very rich people. So they used it to gain influence, to blackmail people, and to gain connections, and to have an ability to do business substantially greater than they were exposed to earlier on. And Epstein went overboard. He went too far. He was a monster.
He really was.
He showed he was a monster, that he had no boundaries, and he ruined the lives of so many young girls and so many others that got involved with him, including. He was the worst part of my life and has been the worst part of my life as a witness for 9 years of Epstein's outrageous, disgusting behavior. He's a monster.
And you say that because you were set up, basically. You were set up to fall for his crimes.
Well, I was manipulated by Epstein and his partners, his co-conspirators, that have not been brought to justice, but now they're going to face justice. There's no question that all the co-defendants are now going to face justice.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Zev, can you ask about the leases now? Ask Steve, because he can't hear me.
LB has a question about the leases. Are they next in the prosecution list? Are they going to be there for the FBI next on the list?
Well, Nick, there are two alive family members, Julian Lease and Nicholas Lease. Julian Lease, who was under my supervision when he worked at the same company I worked at, will cooperate. He will testify and he'll cooperate with the FBI and he'll make a deal. And now he's very exposed. His brother, Nicholas Lease, who is the money partner of Jeffrey Epstein and Darren Indike, he won't cooperate. He will not go to the other side with the FBI and the Justice Department. He'll try not to help. But this case is at a turning point today, and the FBI now has the leverage. They have the ability to bring this case to all the defendants right now.
It's interesting.
It's amazing.
Nicholas Lease must have a lot of the money, right? He must still have a lot of Epstein's funds must be somehow in Nicholas Lease's orbit, because he's the only person who would have had control over them.
I'm going to tell that whole story of Nicholas Lease and the billions of dollars. I'm going to explain the entire story, which I've been getting you involved in a little bit, Zev. Yep. And this is an amazing story of how they were able to steal billions of dollars and control so much money. It's outrageous misconduct. They're monsters.
Ghislaine had $20 million is a lot of money for her to have, plus properties. And, you know, however much she had after dealing with Jeffrey, you know, sort of made their own money. I'm curious in that we do have, I think, quite a lot of circumstantial evidence that Maxwell's money, that's apparently that her father had his own victims in that pension scam.
He did have his own victims, correct? Yeah,
and I'm wondering, so I wonder how they must be feeling. You know, we even had one interacting with us on Twitter of, you know, I was a victim of my pension was gone from this guy. I'm just wondering if there's a way for the money to make its way over to those victims as well, since it looks like it was her father's money that was pushed through Towers and that they pushed onto the other side and walked away with quite a bit of that.
So Albie's
asking up their little operation.
About the money, firstly, that Ghislaine had. Like she was supposedly, I'm riffing off a little bit of your question, but she was supposedly poor or broke when she came to the United States in 1991. Now she's worth $20 million. Are you surprised by that number?
We're going to find out soon enough when she makes an application for bail as to how much money she has where. And what she claims belongs to her. We don't know today, the day of her arrest, how much money she actually has. But she made a fortune with Jeffrey Epstein. Millions and millions of dollars were earned by her with Jeffrey Epstein in his crimes. Jeffrey Epstein dealt with billions of dollars. Ghislaine Maxwell was next to him, right next to him, when he dealt with the billions of dollars. And I'm going to tell that story. That story's coming out.
Albie was asking about whether the victims of Robert Maxwell, the pension victims and the other victims, whether they would be able to see some of the money come to them for their suffering.
Well, you have the royal family not helping. If the royal family decided to help, then the victims of Robert Maxwell could be paid back some damages. There's no question, because there's so much money involved in the Jeffrey Epstein crimes, and this fortune is now controlled by Darren Indike, personally
controlled by Darren Indike, the entire thing.
Wow. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, a co-defendant who's named in lawsuit after lawsuit is controlling all this money.
Well, he was Epstein's right-hand man for decades.
Without a doubt, he's the man that was there, that acted with Epstein in all of this work. and acted with Maxwell as well.
Yeah.
And Maxwell's going to talk, and she's going to name him. And he's going to get arrested.
There's some $300 million in at least one of those companies. I think the Southern Trust, there's $300 million, but they have 7 companies in the Virgin Isles that the Virgin Isles is suing the Indike about. And each of those seems to have a criminal activity involved in each of those companies. So it seems likely, at least, that they should be run out of that job, but they're still in it.
Well, they're going to be run out of the now, thanks to the FBI, because the FBI has arrested the main target, who can turn the table on Darren Indike and others that are named in all these lawsuits. Alan Dershowitz has been very quiet today.
Yes, he has.
Ghislaine Maxwell,
I noticed,
is an eyewitness.
Right. It's really interesting that he's not normally quiet. He's not normally shy to express his opinions. Did you notice in I think it was one of the documents they filed today, maybe the detention document, it said that in a footnote that between 2007 and 2011, more than $20 million were transferred from Jeffrey Epstein's accounts to Ghislaine Maxwell's accounts, and then some of those millions were transferred back into accounts associated with Epstein. Does that make any sense to you? I found it really confusing, but there it was at the footnote of one of the documents filed in court today.
I can help you understand that. There was transactions closed, business deals in real estate in the benefit of Ghislaine Maxwell, paid for by Jeffrey Epstein. She bought a very expensive home on the east side, a few blocks away from Jeffrey Epstein, and she sold the home, and the lawyer that participated in moving that money between Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and the real estate was Darren Indike as one of the lawyers, and that's a big part of the $20 million.
So he bought her townhouse as a gift, and then he's also involved in the sale of it in between 2007 and 2011, where she made a pretty nice profit of it.
Well, I'm going to explain soon how that worked, because it worked in a very complicated money laundering style and method that was totally illegal. Completely illegal.
Sounds illegal. You know,
it is illegal. It's unjust enrichment. It's completely, look, $1 million in cash was paid for that New Hampshire house anonymously. $1 million. Right. And they didn't want to give up the name of the person that was going to be living there, who is Ghislaine Maxwell. So she spent $1 million, or Darren Indike spent $1 million.
Unbelievable! And it's
put her in a place.
A very nice property, 158 acres apparently, and she bought it just in December under an anonymized LLC. She was complaining in court she couldn't even pay her legal fees a few weeks ago. So obviously that wasn't true.
That was horseshit.
Spies are sometimes they're lying.
Well,
did you know that?
The Jeffrey Epstein estate for her legal fees under the charge that Jeffrey Epstein agreed to reimburse her overhead completely. And she claims to have writings, but she forgot to say that she was his criminal co-conspirator in her lawsuit against the estate.
Spies don't often tell the truth. It's one of the things they have to be good at to get good at their jobs.
He was charged by the FBI for perjury today.
Right, 2 counts of perjury.
Yes, she lied. She lied to them.
There's no question that she's being charged for lying.
She's a liar.
And that's a big issue.
Steve, I wanted to get to LB and Eric a chance to jump in here. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about either of those topics? I'm still curious about the life of deceit, but also the perjury. How much we probably don't know about Ghislaine and Jeffrey.
We could say there's all this stuff we don't know about them, but we know a tremendous amount about them. It's just no one wants to talk about it in the way that needs to be talked about. And I think that is finally happening. We do have people, this incredible amount of work that you've done, that I've done with Steve, with Ben Menashe, with other sources, really laying out that these people were involved with arms traffickers. These a continuation of Robert Maxwell's operation. It was entered this interesting phase, this sort of private intelligence. We're intelligence operatives for whoever will pay us, but also for our main directorates, right? And they accomplished extraordinary things. Robert Maxwell accomplished extraordinary things, KGB and for Israel. He just did. And possibly for the United Kingdom. And we don't even know, maybe for us. It is a world of secrecy, but we can see what he was up to, what he did, how he did it. There's documentation on who he formed businesses with, who he went and met with, what kind of sort of global, whole scale operations he was involved with, like Iran-Contra. We've got it. We know what he did. We know what his purchases were. We know what his front was in terms of publishing. We know how he used publishing. We could imagine the way that someone in his position would have continued to forward and advance his objectives and his agendas based on the resources that he had and the way he was ushered through society, literally carrying the Queen's umbrella at one point while she's touching his coat. I mean, this is, we know, we got it. So bloop, he has, accidental homicide on himself off the side of his boat. And his favorite daughter is all of a sudden moved in with his protege, right? Going to New York. And then they start their thing with mysterious sums of money that seem to drop out of the sky for everyone at that time swimming around them. But we know where they got it. We know where they got big parts of it. It was laundered through Tower. We know that was probably Iran-Contra money coming through there. That was Maxwell's, hundreds of millions of dollars, along with Adnan Khashoggi's. Know what Jeffrey was. He was working with the Paul Manaforts of the world. He was working with the Khashoggis of the world. He was pushing huge, vast sums of money that have been loited out of intelligence services and other operations from God knows how many nations, some of it being flight capital, like what he did with Marcos's money out of the Philippines, and pushing it through these financial instruments, these schemes, these scams in some cases, Ponzi schemes, whatnot, or other instruments and things that he'd set up through interconnected offshores with the help of Bear Stearns, still working with them. That the key thing that we don't have, that it really is the final sort of shoe to drop, is how much of that money from this global fucketeering that Jeffrey was involved with, that Maxwell and the leases taught him how to do, that Adnan Khashoggi was involved with, how much of that through Bear Stearns and those bonds in these key years of the 80s and early 90s was pushed through Donald Trump casinos. I would like to know that. We have all these money laundering, investigations more than anyone else in casino history that were around our now president at the time, and all of them, poof, disappeared. I would like to know more about that. So I think that's the stuff that we can get more information on, is just the money connecting Epstein to Trump. We want that. That's big.
Even though we do have a sense of what Maxwell did and what Epstein did, I don't think we really have a sense of the totality of it yet at all. When you think about an operation that's lasted 80 years, anything, there's so much we can't see. And it was all covert.
There's so much we can't see, but we can see what they left behind. Where did Epstein put his focus? He put his focus into academia. He put his focus into private sort of security software that was coming out of intelligence agencies. He put his focus into gaming at one point. He put his focus into tech and academia. That's where he put his focus into. Right. That's where he was going. So why was he so invested in, and that was mainly men. Why was he so invested in those men and setting up those institutes? What was that philanthropic shit about that he was doing as well? So yeah, we can get more answers on all that, but we can see where he spent his time and his energy. And there are witnesses who are talking about, well, these are the conversations I was in with him. We were looking at genetics, right? So
genetics,
we can kind of get it.
All these things that these guys were involved in.
We can kind of see, data. Let's move it all into data. So he was there doing his thing. And then he was, why did he have all that recording equipment? I just can't, in all of his properties, in all of his vehicles, I cannot imagine coming out of the world of spies that he was having all that record and organized crime, that he was having all his places wired to the gills with cameras and recording equipment just because it was his own personal preference. I mean, this is not Radio Shack, man, right? No,
he had a big installation. They were targeting specific.
It's a big installation, and they were targeting people.
Yeah. And this is the thing that I don't think we can see.
It's a leverage off.
Is the leverage and the geopolitical implications of that leverage. How many policy decisions were made because, well, maybe Jeffrey had a tape, or someone else got a tape, or someone was leaned on in one way or another not to vote a certain way. What would the world look like today if we didn't have 30 years of Jeffrey Epstein and more with Robert Maxwell mucking around in our system?
This is my point. Exactly. This, they didn't spend billions of dollars this way on these operations, to buying real estate and then putting these scumbags in it and wiring it up and an industrial scale rape operation if they weren't trying to get $1 trillion out of it. They needed an ROI here because there was a lot of risk. They needed the United States harmed. They needed us not to be following the rule of law. They needed to control our policy by controlling the human beings. And that's Russian military science right there. And that's who these people are.
It's a story that's not going to go away quickly because we have so much to find out. Is he the biggest spy scandal in history, Eric?
So far,
yeah.
The week is young.
Steven, as we end the show, it's a lot could come next. Certainly there's going to be blowback from the powers that be. The forces that originally got Jeffrey Epstein off in 2008, they're going to be back to try and get Ghislaine Maxwell off. It's going to get ugly before it gets resolved. What do you think is going to happen next?
What I'm worried about is the safety for Ghislaine Maxwell in prison. Ghislaine Maxwell is the largest threat to very powerful people, and I'm very concerned about her imprisonment in protecting her and not have an incident like Jeffrey Epstein. Could you picture if she commits suicide?
It'd be horrible.
What will happen to this case? And that's what concerns me.
There was a suicide out in Los Angeles recently with a producer out here who I'm not going to say I knew this person, but I can say that it was odd and sad, and it's tragic, and so it's not something to exploit for the purpose of just a show or anything. I want to be mindful of that. But it was Steve Bing, and I'm wondering if Hoff knew of him, because he was one of the people who came and spoke to the courts about Jeffrey sort of giving in his first prosecution. So he knew him, and he spoke to him. He was willing to go on the record and sort of be a character witness for Jeffrey.
LB's asking you, Steve, if you know about Steve Bing and his apparent suicide, how it connects to this particular case, and what you think that the ramifications are for someone like Ghislaine.
There is linkage directly into this case with Steve Bing. And I can't explain that linkage now because it's highly confidential and it doesn't belong on the air. But there is substantial linkage between Bing and Epstein and the crimes and what's taking place. And he's in the mix. And we'll see how that comes about now. But you have the number one witness in custody by the FBI this minute.
That's right. That's amazing. It's unbelievable. And
it's on.
And just to note again on that, just sort of close that, like, there is, the damaged lives by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine. Just think we're going to find out there's just so many people's lives that they damaged on so many levels. Yeah, the
ramifications are going to be massive. And the more we think about what they've done, and the more and we are genuinely concerned about Ghislaine's well-being. And this is not a place that someone like her would have expected to find herself in any way, shape, or form. And basically, you could argue was following orders, even though she was doing these despicable things. These were, this was a military operation in some ways. And so, this is the situation we find ourselves in today. But the most important thing is that there is a fight for the rule of law. You can't look at today's events and not really believe that the Department of Justice is still a functioning, independent judicial department that is actually functioning on behalf of the people of the United States. And that this took a lot of bravery. This took a lot of courage. And I'm surprised. I'm surprised Bill Barr is the guy doing it, because
he's not doing it. They're doing it.
He's not doing it. He's not doing. Audrey Strauss.
And he failed.
I love Strauss is in the house, baby.
Strauss
She's the one doing it.
But what's Bill Barr going to do next?
Girlfriend. I missed Barbara Underwood so bad. I have a new justice girlfriend now in New York. Yeah,
what's Bill Barr going to do next, though? What's Donald Trump going to do next? Because Audrey Strauss could not be in a job for that much longer if she continues with this independent.
Well, Ghislaine is indicted, so let's roll with that. Let's roll with that for today.
I'm happy to roll with it.
Let's just roll with that, and then we can go back to the doom and gloom, despair. Another day. There's plenty ahead.
There's plenty ahead. Yeah, it was a remarkable day. I think I've said it many, many times on the air that I did not believe Ghislaine Maxwell would ever be.
You have. We've had that argument. So
and who knew? Who knew? I was wrong, and happy to be wrong. Happy to be wrong about that today. So, Steve, thanks very much for joining us. Any last thoughts from you?
Well, we're going to see many more arrests from this case. Now with Ghislaine in custody, the case has just started.
Right.
This is day one in the Jeffrey Epstein case.
Who do you think's the next target? Is it Wexner?
We're going to find out pretty quickly who the next target is. Wexner is not cooperating and not suing, which is shocking. And he's definitely in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got lawyers that are prominent, and he's spending a lot of money in legal fees. So we'll see what happens very soon.
Support Narativ's independent journalism at patreon.com/Narativ, and check out our podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe and download.